So, Final Fantasy X-3 is certainly a topic that has been discussed by fans ever since Final Fantasy X-2 was released, you know, kind of breaking that tradition of Final Fantasy only existing as single entries in the franchise. So that conversation has gone on now for many, many years. Now, to the best of my knowledge, I could be wrong on this, so please do correct me if I am wrong, but to the best of my knowledge, Square themselves have never really commented in an official capacity on this subject about the possibility of there being a third, or rather a second sequel to Final Fantasy X. But today we have an interview with GameInformer.com. I'm going to leave a link to this interview, to this article, in the video description. And they have an interview with producer Yoshinori Kitase, who worked on Final Fantasy X and many Final Fantasy games actually. And he speaks about the possibility of Final Fantasy X-3. So let's get into that today. Now, this is quite an interesting interview, so I do recommend that you read through it, but I am just going to be focusing on the topic at hand for this video. I should also mention as well, I have got some pretty beefier videos in the works, with a little bit more involved than this one, so that's why you haven't been seeing much content from in the past few days. I've been working on those, but I do want to bring you some stuff since this news has made it to the internet. Anyway, if we head down to the bottom here, again, some good questions, you might want to check those out. You can see here we've got, Game Informer asking Kitase about committing to Final Fantasy X-3 at Square. And sadly, the answer from Kitase, it seems, is no, at least not at the moment. And he says, and I quote, the idea comes up from time to time when a few close people that had worked on the original Final Fantasy X talk with each other. So basically, the original team, you know, would like to do this. I'm sure that they would. They've no doubt got a lot of passion for the original Final Fantasy X, and I'm sure they would jump at the opportunity to make another sequel. But as always, these things are rarely left up into the hands of those that actually have, you know, the creative process. So, however, it is merely standard chit-chat, and there have been no movements to realise it because once the project begins, there is no doubt that it would become a massive project with hundreds of staff working on it. And I have an ongoing project that I need to finish before then. Little hint there, I suspect, to the Final Fantasy VII Remake. Interestingly, talking about the Final Fantasy VII Remake, this answer that Kitase gave here, which sounds like it's shutting down any concept really of there being a, you know, another sequel to Final Fantasy X. This is pretty much the party line. This is pretty much the answer that Square used to consistently give when asked about a remake for Final Fantasy VII. They would often say, no, the scope of such a project would be so big, now that technology's improved, we just can't do that, it's too much, it'd be too much work, it'd be too much commitment. And of course, they ended up signing up to it and getting on with it. So this isn't, I don't think, a definitive no from Kitase here in terms of a Final Fantasy X-3. It's certainly a possibility. I mean, after all, it's something that fans have consistently spoken of and still to this day consistently request from Square. And it does seem, based on the Final Fantasy VII Remake, that if you nag Square for long enough and hard enough, they may eventually cave in to those requests and those demands. So who knows what the future holds. But right now it seems that Final Fantasy VII Remake is the main focus for Square in terms of the Final Fantasy brand. I strongly suspect at this point that there is no Final Fantasy 16 that's been taken seriously too much by Square in the works behind the scenes, despite some earlier speculation that there may have been a project along those lines. So it seems that Square do want to focus on the remake, and since that project itself is going to be taking multiple releases over multiple years, we don't know how long yet, we don't know how many years, we don't know how many games the remake is going to encompass. I suspect unless they, you know, do something in terms of their other development teams, which there's no hint of at the moment, but unless they, you know, go in some other direction, I can't imagine the topic of Final Fantasy X-3 being taken seriously for the near future. And while I expect that a lot of you would not have hoped for this particular answer to the question of Final Fantasy X-3, I think there is some positive to come out of it. And that's with this line here that Kitase says. where he talks about that if they do proceed, if they ever did, there would be no doubt that it would become a massive project with hundreds of staff working on it. In other words, it's something that Square would take seriously and dedicate a lot of resources to. So they're not just going to do it for the sake of it, just to cash in on the Final Fantasy X brand or name, but they would dedicate a lot of money, a lot of people in order to get it done properly and to get it done right. So hopefully they've learned lessons with Final Fantasy VII. Initially the remake was outsourced to a third-party developer before they decided that was a mistake and they brought it back in-house to their own development teams. So with Final Fantasy X-3, it sounds like if they ever did proceed, they wouldn't be doing that. They would be keeping it in-house at Square and putting their own people on it, though it would take a lot of people. Alright then folks, well, what do you think of this news? Is this something you're surprised by? Was you expecting Square to be working on Final Fantasy X-3 behind the scenes? Or is it something you were hoping for but wasn't expecting? Please do share your thoughts and more in the comment section below, and I appreciate you stopping by for today's video. Don't forget to hit the like button if you've enjoyed it, and I'll see you next time. Goodbye. Well, thank you so much for stopping by, checking out the video today. Now, perhaps you might consider becoming a YouTube channel member. Doing so not only supports me as a creator, but it also bestows upon you certain cool bonuses, such as the ability to have your name stand out in YouTube comments and live stream chat, as well as having yourself credited in every future upload that I do. If that sounds interesting, check out the join button, which you can find just below if watching on PC.